Hi, this is Kristen Springs, and this is my informative speech on crude oil. Everything the life touches is crude oil. Everything. So picture this. You have no food, no water, no clothes, and no transportation. This is what life would be like without crude oil. Crude oil is a dominant, yet unperceivable force in our everyday lives, so much so that when it's gone, it'll have an even bigger impact on our lives. So what is crude oil? Well, crude oil is the product of decades worth of organisms' remains that have been pressurized and heated from layers of sediment rock. In the beginning, crude oil was abundant. It was everywhere, so much so that people actually got aggravated with how much oil was just laying around. These deposits of oils would be found on land in puddles called seeps. Nobody really knew what to do with these oil seeps. It's been noted in history that oil was actually used to make quite a few paintings that we find today. The first person to actually drill purposely for oil was Edwin Drake. Most people thought he was crazy because they didn't know what exactly he was planning to do with his oil, but he didn't care. On August 27, 1859, Edwin Drake created the very first oil gusher, which produced over 400 gallons of oil in just 24 hours. Because he didn't patent this idea, many other oil riggers from around the country and around the world also copied his idea in search for gold, in search for oil, which is also sometimes called black gold. After the boom of oil riggers came J.D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Corporation, the very first of its kind. Then they had to find ways to find oil on other places that isn't land. For example, offshore oil drilling became a huge thing. And then it came time to figure out just what oil could be used for, which is when Henry Ford came into the picture. Henry Ford created the very first automobile that ran off petroleum, which has traces of oil inside of it. So we come to today. So how is oil in our lives today? Well, the clothes we wear we wouldn't have without oil. How, you ask? Well, in order to get the clothes you were wearing, you had to drive to a store to pick them up. In order for the store to have the clothes you wanted, they had to have a truck bring them the clothes from the company. Without oil, there would be no transportation. Another way that oil affects our everyday lives is with food. Much like clothes, you have to go to a store to buy food. Without oil for transportation, or the oil that transports the food from farms, we wouldn't have any access to food, or water for that matter. Professor Chris Rhodes gave a speech in which he said 87% of Americans and people around the world are 87% dependent on oil. This is an incredibly large number because it's hard to go from 87% to 0% overnight, which means that when we're out of oil, we're out for good. M.K. Hubbard came up with the idea of peak oil. M.K. Hubbard's idea states that in the beginning, oil was always on the rise. All the way up until the point where we very first started drilling for oil, we had as much oil as we were ever going to have. From that point on, we were always going to be pulling from a source of oil that had been growing for decades. Meaning that once we pulled all that we had, there would be none left. Crude oil is a non-renewable source, which reiterates the fact that once we're out for good. There are some plus sides to being out of oil. For example, air pollution will go down since there's not toxins being released into the air by our automobiles and such. And that's all to my speech. I hope I taught you a little something about crude oil. And here's my audience. Olivia. Thanks for watching.